All right. Good morning, everybody. I assume you will be able to hear me in a second because there is, of course, some massive delay. So let's just wait and see. Ah, there we are. Good morning, everybody. It is a Thursday, the 5th of December, which means that tomorrow is St. Nicholas Day in places like Germany. And as far as I know, it's Blackface Day in the Netherlands today. Possibly. That's Sinterklaas, right? When you do the Black Pete thing, Zwarte Pete thing. I think so. Um, which is one of those funny things that, for whatever reason, depending on where you are, those winter holidays are celebrated on different days. And that's with, I mean, that's with the Sinterklaas or Saint Nicholas in Germany. And I mean, obviously later on it's with Christmas, where in Germany, Christmas Eve, like the 24th, is like the biggest sort of like celebratory day. At least, that's where you do the Christmas present and all of that stuff. And then the 25th and the 26th are more like, I mean, you go to church or you visit your um, relatives that are living somewhere else, but that's different, obviously, from, say the US, where, Christmas is the 25th. And that's just like one of those like weird things. And the Sinterklaas, Saint Nicholas thing works the same way, which I assume is because those kind of people that have to whiz around the world to give people presents can't be everywhere at the same time. So we have different time zones, and that's why they have to be in different places at different times. I mean, that makes sense, right? Not that I'm an expert on, supernatural beings that give hand out presents to children. I'm not that kind of person. So yeah, that I guess my most valuable contribution to the morning. I have been up for about an hour. I have spent that time reading the Acts of the Apostles, which is always a fun part of the Bible. As you can tell, I'm almost done with the whole thing. I mean, that is if you know, like, sort of like your Bible. And yeah, the acts are kind of fun because it's obviously the story of like what the apostles do after Jesus gets killed and everything. And a lot of it takes it's far more historical in that it's the kind of history that if you study history, you kind of know stuff about because it's already Roman Empire, late Hellenism when it comes to, say, Asia Minor and those places, which is interesting because it's even like, yeah, and then the Hellenists got mad, and I'm like, what do you mean the Hellenists got mad? And obviously, if you have like a Catholic Bible, which I don't have at the moment, you may have the Book of Maccabee, and you know about the um, the revolution or the rebellion of the Maccabees against the Hellenist, occupation or Hellenistic cultural sort of inroads into Jewish life at the time. But that's very much the very very obscure special knowledge that most people don't need. And yeah, so but that's like interesting. And obviously with Paul and people like that, you have them run around all that area and then hang out in Caesarea a lot of time, and being judged, supposedly judged in Caesarea in the amphitheater there before being sent to Rome and everything. And yeah, I've been to Caesarea in the past, and it's like if you're into ancient history, it's a really cool place. They have the amphitheater is more or less fully still exists, and you can walk around in it and look at it. I mean, it's a Roman amphitheater right at the beach, which is really cool. It's like behind the sort of like what you might call stage in, yeah, sort of there's like maybe 100 meters until you're at the actual sea, which is Mediterranean, which is really neat. and they dug up. There's a bit of a museum. They in the harbor there. They dug up. I think it was an Egyptian sort of treasure fleet a couple of years ago. So they have lots and lots and lots of gold coins that were because some treasure ship kind of sunk there during the Roman times, and it's if you're into ancient history, Caesarea is a pretty cool place. That is, of course, if you can go there, which is obviously not an option at the moment, or not an option I would recommend. But yeah, so that's why the acts feel kind of interesting, because I'm like, hey, I've been there, and the fun thing is, and well, fun is relative, I guess. When I was there, there was like a group of very hardcore evangelical Christians, and that's one thing you notice if you come to Israel, Palestine. You have a lot of Christian, and in most cases, I mean, you have a lot of Christians doing like tourism there, like religious tourism. They call it pilgrimage, but it's not how pilgrimage works. Fuck's sake, get a grip on it. You're doing tourism and looking at stuff, um, and you have people from Eastern Europe coming, which are usually Catholic in a lot of ways, Catholic or Orthodox. And then you have a lot of Americans, which are usually somewhere from the evangelical Christian right. And I mean, we're not talking about Christian Zionism this morning, I hope. But what's interesting is how they are, being bussed through all these places that Jesus supposedly was at some point or another, and then just walk out, and then they look around and get told the Jesus thing again, which, if they're good Christians, they already know that fucking story, right? I mean, even I do. and so, I mean, it's certainly one of the ways that Israel does make money, or used to make money, through tourism, and religious tourism is a big deal there. But the other part was, and that's kind of where I was going, was like when I was at the amphitheater in Caesarea, there was such a group. They obviously had like a local tour guide telling them that whole story about Paul being, the Apostle Paul being in that amphitheater, and the the Jews, um, wanting it to kill him and everything, and then him being, sent to Rome afterwards and everything. A whole dramatic spiel, basically. But you gotta entertain those people at the end of the day, and they were like possibly like either like a local preacher or whatever with like his congregation or whatever. They had like one leading dude, and a lot of younger people, mostly women and children and so forth, with him. I'm not going to judge anything here, but so he gets that spiel. They get that spiel, and then he's like, "Let's all thank the Lord for a wonderful tour guide telling us all these wonderful things, and let's praise the Lord." And then they started singing a fucking hymn in the amphitheater. It was such a weird kind of thing. And I mean, they weren't even singing really well, but like, I guess some people were distracted by whatnot, but it was just such a weird kind of situation. You have these people singing some evangelical hymn, and me and my sister in the background running around with with heavy metal t-shirts and everything, and looking at rocks, going like, "Wow, amphitheater." Hey, Kale, how you doing? Australia, is it a country though, or is it a continent? And I guess it depends on whether you feel political or geographical this morning. So yeah, this is my anecdote of being in the amphitheater of Caesarea and encountering some very weird Christians. Maybe we should do the same thing we did back in Herod's day, I guess. No, obviously not, because sending them all to Rome is even more tourism at this point, I guess. Anyway, so I'm done with the Acts of the Apostles, and I have to do something new now. Which I mean, obviously, there's still the epistles and the Revelation of John, which is all about how he hates Nero. Which, yeah, understandable. Nero was not exactly a nice guy, from all I can tell. So hopefully I'll be done with all of this today, and then I can finally move on to Gog Magog and Ludluda. And those are really good. I mean, the first one is a really good book, and the second one I'm positive will also be a really good book, and really weird. It's also very British. Oh yeah, right. I always keep forgetting that since you're on the other side of the planet, you do in fact have summer right now. So I suspect it's going to be somewhere in the high 30s and low 40s in Celsius degrees at the moment for you guys down there. Yeah, but I mean, isn't that kind of part of the problem that technically it's is it still part of the same sort of continental landmass, even though there's water in between, or is it technically on a different plate or whatever they're called? Not that I know anything about geology and geography. I'm not that kind of nerd. But yeah, I've never been to Australia. I obviously I've known a lot of people from there. Usually because they are misbehaving at heavy metal festivals in Europe, or being working at pubs in London, which I think is like a requirement for a pub in London is to have at least one Aussie working there in a bar, or it's the other way around that all Australians are required by law to at least work once in a pub in London. But maybe that's not how it is, and I was just like very lucky or unlucky to just only meet Australians in pubs. All right, so it's yeah, 6 p.m. now. Okay, I mean 32 is already hot, so I suspect it was much hotter during like a couple hours ago during noon-ish times, right? Well, I can't afford it at the moment. I mean, that's the main thing. I like any like sort of like different content transcontinental flights are not something I can afford at the moment. Like even if I wanted to, it's just super fucking expensive. Because I've worked and talked with bands from there, and they have the same kind of problem, right? It's like when they want to come to play in Europe, it's basically unless they're really big, it's basically impossible because they have like to spend a couple thousand euros just to come here, and it's the other way around. It's the same thing, which is why there's so few like non-Australian or like so few European bands playing in Australia, because it's you know you go there, you spend a couple thousand euros to just fly there, and then you still need to figure out how to get around that massive continent where you or island or whatever you want to call it, that massive land blob where you still have to basically either drive for 20 hours to get to the next show or fly to the next place again. And there's not that many places where you can play shows if you're a smaller band, so it's a bit of a mess being there, I guess. So yeah, I still would be interested in going if at some point in my life I happen to have enough money to afford that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can see that, Kale. I mean, in general, I feel Europe is a pretty neat sort of destination to travel to if you're not from Europe, I guess. Because if you go to like say the European Union and you get like a visa, if you need a visa, not that you need one, I think if you're Australian, um, you just come here. You don't have like any border controls or anything during the European Union. I mean, we do have now because of Nazis, But in general, you can if you're like a white looking person and enter the European Union, you can travel around the entire continent basically without getting hassled anywhere. Destination like, distances are fairly close, and there's like a lot of variation. Like you can start in something in Portugal and go all the way up to fucking Norway, and then go all the way around through like Eastern Europe, the Balkans, end up in Greece at the end of the day, and you can do all of that, which is like a lot of variation. And it's you get a lot of different things if you manage to come to Europe in a way that I mean, I guess Australia has a lot of variation as well, but we don't realize it because it's called one country at this point, and we just assume that countries are sort of these relatively monolithic places, which obviously not. But like from a European mindset, it's more like different countries look the same until you come to a different sort of like a separate part of a continent, basically. Whereas, so we kind of assume the countries are often like the same place everywhere, which is obviously not true. But yeah, that's a funny one. Yeah, definitely lots of like if you're into like the fantasy stuff and the medieval history stuff, and because so much of sort of Western culture is still sort of dominated by like a European and mostly like Western European sort of history and culture, right? In a lot of ways. Europe offers a lot of stuff for tourism. Right? You can get all these fucking castles. You get all the Roman shit here. You get the Greek shit here. You get like the medieval stuff here. So that's always like a nice thing, I guess, for a lot of tourists. Especially, I mean, if you are say like a white culture, like a settler culture, like you know most of Australia and New Zealand, and obviously large parts of large parts of the United States and so forth are. Um, it feels like you're a relatively young sort of society in that regard, and then you come to Europe and stuff's old. I remember like years ago, we were like uh, I had friends from a band coming over for a tour, and like before the tour started, we went on like a pub crawl in the town where I live, and we were in one of these like it's an old vaulted cellar where there's a bar, and we were drinking down there, and then one of the guys is like, "How old is this thing?" And I'm like, "Well, it's the oldest sort of like vaulted cellar in this town, and it was built around like the year 1000 BCE around that time. So it's like 1,000-year-old cellar, and fuck, people were drinking down here before white people had even discovered our continent." And I'm like, yeah, that's sort of accurate, I guess. Yeah, please do. I'm interested. So yeah, are you still reading the passage, or have you finished that one, Caleb? That's like a question I would ask, and then I guess we'll better start doing the sprinting productivity part of the whole endeavor for a while. Although, like, there's an anecdote that like some happened to some Australian friends of mine that is also probably the most Australian thing that I've ever encountered, and I may have told that one before, but it's just so funny. So personally. They were all, doing like coming to Europe for like a year or two, working in pubs and just traveling around and stuff. When they were like around 20, somewhere in their early 20s, I guess. And they had like a birthday party at one of their mates' places, and they were drinking, obviously. And at some point during that party, a chair broke. Someone sat down. It was older, rickety wooden chair, and he's like, there's an open fireplace in my play in the flat. Just like break it up and put it in the fireplace. I'll just like burn it with the rest of the stuff next time I have a fire in that fireplace, which sure. And then later during that party, he just passed out because, drinking and stuff. And when he woke up the next morning, most of his friends were gone. And there was a huge pile of ash in the fireplace, and he had no chairs left in his entire apartment. So he called them. I was like, did you bastards just like burn all my chairs." And they're like, "Yeah, sorry, things got kind of out of hand. No worry, we'll fix it." So they just grabbed a couple of beers and went out on the streets in London and just like stole chairs from like random chairs from different pubs in the streets and just brought him like a pack of like stolen bar chairs from different pubs to replace the ones they've burned. And that's like the quintessential Australian sort of anecdote that I've encountered. It's like, yeah, that's why the British chucked you all on that island back in the day. Yeah, I mean the Louvre is I mean, they're both very much about like stuff that we could that the different countries could steal from all over the place. Obviously, not all of it. The Louvre definitely has bought art and shit like that, but a lot of it has also been ended up there because of Napoleon and other people just conquering places. But it certainly with a focus on that sort of like art is different from the British Museum, which is just like stuff we found while doing imperialism. I can see that. And they should give back the fucking stuff they stole from the Acropolis. Yeah, okay, 200 pages left. That's a pretty big book, though, right? I always keep forgetting how long it is, but I think it's one of those 800-page kind of monstrosities. All right, let's actually do the thing where we try to do stuff and maybe read or write or both or whatever. And I'll talk to you in 45 minutes, which is something like 5 past the hour, which would be the hour of 9 for me. And I am back. Hey Apollo, how you doing? Yeah, it's one of those wild stories, but sometimes you meet people that are just have a very different approach to ideas like private property and and rules around that, and they're fun to hang out with in a lot of ways, but they're also the kind of ways get you into situations where like afterwards you're like, holy shit, that was really, really, really dumb. And yeah, it's the kind of thing that happens from time to time. 900 pages for the passage. Yeah, that's a lot. Um, and that's me saying it after, reading the fucking Bible again. But luckily, I'm almost done with it. Just a little bit of Revelation and some, epistles, and then I'm free to do something else. So how did y'all do? Did you get stuff done? I did, go through messages and stuff. I have to help, start organizing the whole trip to the Get Wasted and Doomed festival on Saturday. Make sure that, everyone who wants to go has their shit together, knows which train we're taking, knows when to buy booze, that kind of stuff. Doesn't steal any chairs, I guess. Yeah, so that's something I did, and going through unread emails and comments and stuff. I have updated my screen reader, and I still need to figure out if I can now use YouTube again without it constantly not doing the thing I wanted to do. But yeah, I didn't get any comments yesterday that I needed to reply to because I didn't do any videos, which, yeah, it's starting to wear on me. But what you gonna do? It's one of those like really stupid things where like if you start taking YouTube slightly more seriously, everyone tells you that December is the time when you need to make all the videos because that's when there's like way more money in ads and then you make money. And I'm like, yeah, but right now my brain is fried and I still haven't finished the fucking Mormonism video. And yeah, I could probably do the joy and gratitude tag that Britain tagged me on, and that would probably take me like, I don't know, 10 minutes or whatever, but I don't know. It's stupid in a lot of ways. So that's sort of like where I'm struggling with. Like I couldn't. I wanted to record like part of the Mormonism video yesterday, and I made the structure, and then I changed the structure, and I was looking at it, and it's like, yeah, all you need to do is like actually switch on the camera and record it, and even if it sucks, you can record it again. And then I just like couldn't get myself to switching on the camera and doing the thing, which is incredibly frustrating. Hey, Britton. And yeah, no, I will do that tag. It's not that I'm aware of it. I saw that you tagged me. I wanted to comment on it, and then comments didn't stick, and then I didn't want to, actually open my phone and look search for the video again to then write a comment because I'm, lazy and stuff. I will do the tag. I just, yeah, need to get my shit together. Also, I need to decide whom to tag afterwards, and then, yeah, I'm bad at that as well. So there we go. YouTube is hard sometimes, I guess. Oh, good to know. I wasn't aware of that, Apollo. Sorry. I wonder if that is because of stuff here. If it's my internet that is a problem, if it's my computer that's a problem, if it's Restream that's a problem. There's so many like different points that could be the issue. I don't know, because Restream doesn't necessarily give me info on that, which is kind of the frustrating stuff, right? See, that's like one of those really frustrating things. I'm streaming from like a laptop. It's a new laptop I had to get earlier this year when my old one just broke on me after years and years, and it doesn't even have like an actual like network cable plug anymore. You have to use Wi-Fi, and I'm like, that's not necessarily the best thing to do. And then you deal with that. And yeah, and then obviously I live somewhat outside of the current fiber optics cables, so I have like slower internet up here on the hill on the Lonely Mountain, and yeah, I don't know. It's the stupid thing about all of these minor technical issues is that they're all sort of like drains on like general like mental capacity and it drain on like mental energy and enthusiasm and all of that stuff, and none of these are absolutely insurmountable like obstacles or whatever, but like it just like keeps piling up, and it's all these minor things just constantly having to deal with all of that minor shit is just like super frustrating. Yeah, of course, because it doesn't run on diesel. We only have technology that works well if it also helps us destroy the planet. I mean, it could be your phone. It could also be. I mean, Restream as a software has been very buggy recently, and it might be because some people assume that it's because they've had like a large sort of like inrush of new users because something else like StreamYard recently basically doubled their doubled their prices. So a lot of people switching to like a cheaper alternative. Maybe that's part of that. They're just like having to sort of scale up stuff. I don't know. That doesn't sound like it's like the best explanation about what you're going to do. It could be so many different breaking points, I guess, and that's the frustrating part about it. But yeah, as I said, like week hasn't been super productive in when it comes to doing like anything. Like I know what I have to do next, and it just isn't happening, and it's sort of annoying in a lot of ways. And like back in the day, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do the whole Sanderson stuff, so I'll be around when Wind and Truth comes out, and everyone is actually interested in Sanderson for a while. And here we are, and the Mormonism video isn't even there, and Wind and Truth came out today, so no, it comes out tomorrow, I think. either today or tomorrow, and I'm like, oh, yeah, clearly I fucked that one up massively, but I guess it's on brand for me to be very late to everything. I already joked about it. It's like I'm probably BookTube's slowest growing channel. I mean, it's not true. There's other channels that grow even slower, but compared to like everyone who started their BookTube channels like at the same time I did, I'm just like falling further and further behind, and sometimes it's frustrating. Even though I try to not look at anyone else and any numbers, because numbers lie and always drag you down. Um, I did read Elantris, and I think it's not as bad as people say it is, but it's also not as Sanderson as later books. So maybe people who really enjoy Sanderson books don't like Elantris because it's not yet the full Sanderson formula, although I think you can see it's sort of like early beginnings in there. I have thoughts on Elantris, but I need to finish the Mormonism video first, and that's something. Like the longer I keep sort of like pushing this ahead of myself, the more it feels like all those papers for university that I didn't finish because I did sort of like the same thing, and then of course all that piled up sort of fear or frustration and so forth kind of just starts cropping up again and bubbling up again, and I'm like, oh god, it's just like back then, and I failed back then, so I'll definitely fail with the video as well, and that's certainly partly what is currently sort of like holding me back in a way, and I'm trying to overcome that. And I worry that if I don't do the Mormonism video, if I don't exercise that specific kind of demon, in a way, that I don't know what I'll do after that. If I'll be able to do anything larger than just like, hey, here's a book I read kind of videos, and I want to do something larger because I feel there's room on the bookish side of content for something more than just spoiler-free reviews of Sun Eater, which I haven't read, Britain. I suspect I won't enjoy it that much either. I think it's the kind of book that, in the same way that, say, Hyperion is the kind of book that people who have not read a lot of science fiction find incredibly impressive. And if people would only read more than the 5 books and the 5 new books that everyone on BookTube tells them to read, they might actually notice that it's it might not be incredibly bad, but at least not the best thing ever. And the way that especially Sun Eater has been hyped, maybe makes me worried there. Also, that it's constantly compared to especially Gene Wolfe, and I'm like, no, having flowery prose does not make you Gene Wolfe. There's something going on in Gene Wolfe novels that is different, and that you need to prove that you can do that. I mean, Ada Palmer can do it in Terra Ignota, but that's that's a very, very, very specific kind of approach to writing. So I haven't read Sun Eater. I may do so in the future at some point, but I don't expect to really love it as well. And that's kind of my point, because I know Jeroen, and while we don't always agree on stuff, even on books, much less on other things, I know that he has read a lot of books, a lot of science fiction stuff, especially also older stuff and classics. So if he goes, well, it's not that brilliant, I trust his judgment more because I know he has a broader sort of like background from which he's going, well, this is not that special. I mean, nothing wrong with trying Sun Eater. I mean, it's I'm sure there's worse books out there. That's just something that I'm very sure of. But one thing I just noticed yesterday, until the end of the month, Audible has quite a bunch of William S. Burroughs books in its free catalog. So I'm probably gonna supplement my Sanderson slog that will hopefully start next week by reading some insane William S. Burroughs in the middle, which, I'm sure will be very similar to like my to reading Sanderson in a lot of ways, like using a very limited vocabulary, having good Christian messaging, having a very strict code when it comes to chemicals that may or may not enhance your perception. I'm pretty sure it's going to be quite the same thing. Yes, Terra Ignota was the thing that I recommended because of your name. Yes, because one of the characters that sort of is always in there is called Apollo. And yeah, you don't. There is very much sort of like a mystery around their gender. So I figured that might be something you might be interested in. Like Terra Nota in general is a very, very interesting and powerful sort of science fiction series. It's got 4 novels. It is science fiction heavily influenced by Renaissance and Baroque and Enlightenment philosophy and thought in a lot of ways. So there's a lot of like citation quotes and stuff from philosophers of the 17th, 16th, 17th, 18th century. Thomas Hobbes shows up as a narrator for a while. It's wild in a lot of ways, and it does a lot of very interesting things about talks about gender in some very interesting ways, where the entire world does not acknowledge gender or does not acknowledge does not use gender specific pronouns in language. So everyone is free to express their gender the way they want, and everyone goes by they them, and that's that, except for the first person narrator, who does constantly assign gender to other characters, saying, yeah, I'm not supposed to, but this is how I'm doing it. And what's interesting there is that obviously the way the main character does, they assign gender to themselves and other people, is very much diverges very, very clearly from any form of biological sex, if that even comes up. And it sometimes switches throughout the novel. If someone starts behaving in a more masculine way, at some point, they'll end up being called he, him for a while, and then maybe switch back. And it's a weird thing. But there's a lot more stuff going on at the same time. It's not just about the gender thing. I think it's just the one that throws off a lot of people in the beginning. There's some really interesting stuff going on about like the question of God and religion, obviously, because it's sort of like focused on Enlightenment philosophy and radical Enlightenment in a way. I have the suspicion that Ada Palmer has also read Adorno and Horkheimer's Dialectics of Enlightenment, because there's a lot of the kind of people she focuses on are the kind of Enlightenment authors that Adorno and Horkheimer focus on, including de Sade, which is not necessarily someone a lot of people would casually lump in with the Enlightenment, even though, yeah, he kind of belongs there. So yeah, it's a really interesting book that does a lot of crazy shit. And Ada Palmer, being a professor of Enlightenment history at Chicago University, having previously written about Renaissance and Enlightenment reception of Lucretius, for example, clearly knows her shit. So I highly recommend it. It's the kind of book that felt like it was specifically written for me. Because it's the kind of stuff I had to read for that PhD that I started and then never finished. But there's like references in there where I'm like, that's very, very specific. And I know exactly the kind of book where you got that from, because I also had to read that. So it's really cool stuff, a really cool book in that regard. But it's, It's a lot, and I know many people have sort of bounced off it for various reasons. All right, Kale. I don't do hairstyles. I'm too lazy. I used to have like a mohawk for a long time, and then I got just sick of having to deal with that all the time, and just cut it off and let it grow out. And that's sort of like what I've been sticking with. I sometimes when I have to, I just like tie it back in sort of like a ponytail if it's getting in my face for something where I can't have that. But that's about it. I'm too lazy for anything of the sorts. Yeah, I think you might definitely find it interesting, especially with studying political science and so forth. There's a lot of like theories of that stuff coming up. Obviously, with Hobbes and Rousseau and those political thinkers of the past are constantly being sort of um, uh, cited and worked through. So it's a really cool series. I thought about like doing like videos on it, and I still might. Including like a sort of like introduction videos, like, hey, if you want to, get a quick introduction to Enlightenment thought or whatever, here's a bunch of books you might want to read, and if you want to find out about all the stuff that Ada Palmer is sort of sourcing here, because if I already have that knowledge, why not share it with people? And yeah, and then Mormonism took over my life. I mean, first fucking Dan Brown did, and then Mormonism. Or first Mormonism and then Dan Brown and then Mormonism again, because yeah, life. But that's sort of like where I'm at. I should probably. I mean, maybe I'll just do the Terra Ignota thing once I'm done with the Sanderson stuff sometime early next year. Same way, I still need to finish the Ostenard, Last King of Ostenard, the last 4 books, which the final one came out in November. So I want to finish that because I already did like videos for the first one for the original Memory, Sorrow, Thorn books, and for the bridge novel, the Heart of What Was Lost. So it feels like uncompleted, and I need to get these incomplete things off my chest in a lot of ways. So there's that. Yeah, I mean, there's people out there who like Terra Ignota. I know Angela from Literature Science Alliance. I mean, I don't think she has finished it yet, but she does. She did like the first 3 books, and so if you go through 3 of those books and are planning to start the 4th one, I'm pretty sure you're not doing that for hate reading, not with that kind of book. No, I don't, Britain. I don't. I've grown out of that. I think it's something I definitely did like earlier when I was younger. It's there was similar situations when it came to like bands that I really liked, but I've mostly grown beyond that. It usually kind of. I mean, personally offended, no. If someone tells me in detail why they don't like a specific book that I very much enjoy, um, then that does obviously impact how I view that person, depending on what kind of reasons they give, because obviously it gives me an insight in how they think and feel if something doesn't work for them for specific reasons. And I do get more annoyed by people enjoying books that I think are bad. Um, you know, all that praise for Hyperion and the whole Dan Brown stuff. Dan Simmons, fuck them, they're both bad, but like in different ways. Like all that stuff that annoys me because it means that people are uncritically consuming stuff that I think is harmful in its messaging, and that is something that frustrates me, especially if those people then have platforms on YouTube and tell everyone how incredibly smart, complex, and whatever those books are. Words in Time. Jonathan is that kind of person. I fucking hate his guts for that. Like, is Ilium by Dan Simmons the most complex science fiction ever written? No, motherfucker. You have read 10 books in your life. You don't know shit about it. And he's like, yeah, he has Greek mythology in there and Shakespeare, and he mentions Proust. And I'm like, dude, if you had read any of those things, notice how bad it is, but you haven't, so you just assume it's good. And that's the thing that so fucking pisses me off, that so many people on BookTube just like get sort of blinded by or glamored by name dropping books that are supposed to be, you know, Western canon or whatever, right? And they go, well, if it name drops those books, it must also be literature. So I got to tell everyone how good it is, because then people will maybe take me seriously for reading science fiction and not tell me that I should grow up because science fiction is is books for children. And that sort of like inferiority complex that is then used to propagate absolutely harmful bullshit is something that very much annoys me. It's not just Dan Simmons. There's other authors that do the same kind of thing. And it's so frustrating because, like, even years later, like I made those videos on Dan Simmons where I did my best to actually showcase where the issues lie, with, you know, explaining every single detail about it. And people go like years later, Raph hates Dan Simmons. Don't talk to him about Dan Simmons. We can over here, we can actually celebrate how good it is, but not over there with Raph. And I'm like, motherfuckers, I don't know. What can I do? And maybe that's the problem. It's like my approach to BookTube is trying to make the world a better place by telling people stuff about the books they read. And you can still read Dan Simmons, just be aware of what's going on. So that's stuff that annoys me more, where I feel that people are willfully ignoring stuff that is bad or like actively harmful, not just, you know, I don't know, shallow or whatever, but like actively harmful, willfully ignoring that and pretending to be smart, or being above that and so forth. That's the stuff that annoys me, because I think it's, you know, it's tied into like the general like sort of like political discourse moment that we're living in at the moment, where you have a lot of people just going, well, I don't want to deal with all of that stuff, so I'm going to do entertainment, and if you tell me that something I enjoy has problems, I'll call you woke left, and then do dumb shit afterwards. And that's just so fucking frustrating, especially when we're talking to people about people where you go like, well, I thought you were smart, and you decided to not be smart about this, and that's a decision that you have made consciously, and that's kind of the stuff that pisses me off. Not necessarily, you know, other things. No one has to like the same books I like, but recognize when a book is actually, you know, causing harm. Um, yeah, Matt, from Matt's Fantasy Books, book reviews, I do really enjoy him because he is so very direct about his takes. I think he's absolutely wrong about a lot of stuff, but at least he's honest in a way that a lot of other people are not necessarily. And I absolutely hated his like attempt to review Conan. That was really bad, and I haven't even watched the Titus Grown one because, yeah, nah, I don't have to. And I think his approach is interesting in that he, like, we talked about it afterwards. I talked with him a bit about it on his Discord about what I thought was the problem with his Conan review. And he's like, no, I never look up anything about the books before. I don't want any context. And I think that is an interesting approach to reading, because it can definitely work, because obviously context can sort of like impact or like frame your reading experience in a lot of ways, in a positive or in a negative way. But it certainly colors your experience from the get-go, because it does, sort of prime you to read it in a specific way. And that can be wrong. I would argue, and that's sort of like something I might have to think about some more. I would argue that this works for a lot of contemporary writing and stuff that contemporary, like the last 20 years or whatever. I don't know if it works for something like Conan or even older stuff, for classics in a lot of ways, because I don't think we read those the same way we read something that we pick up today. If I pick up a book that is, like Lud Luda that came out on Tuesday that I'm going to read next, I can read that with not thinking about anything else. I mean, I should probably read Gog Magog first because it's, a sequel. But beyond that, I don't need to know anything about Jeff Noon or Steve Beard or any of the authors or what this is about. I can do that. I'm reading this to find out and to be entertained. But if I read something like, say, Arthur Machen or Robert E. Howard or H.P. Lovecraft, right? I'm not necessarily reading them as this sort of entertainment. I'm reading them more for with an academic curiosity in a way. I was like, hey, I want to read a book from the 1930s to find out what the fuss is about, but I'm going to learn something about how people wrote fiction in the 1930s. That's the sort of like way I think you can read a lot of these authors at this point. You can't just read them for fiction, for fictional entertainment, because they wrote for like a very different society. There will be a disconnect. You will not. The things that worked for people reading those books in the 1930s won't work for you because you're not living in the 1930s. So of course, there's a disconnect there that I think does sort of need at least a minimal amount of context. You don't need to know every detail about Robert E. Howard's life, but you should probably understand that these were published in pulp magazines, how that publication system worked, in for example, how you were paid by the word, or sometimes weren't paid for months because everyone was constantly almost broke, and how you got maybe slightly more money if your story made the cover illustrations, which means you have to write in a scene that lends itself to a cover illustration and stuff like that, because that is important to understand how these stories are made. And I think the further back in time you go, the more of that kind of context you need, because the more your personal sort of like life situation differs from the place that you start that thing was written in. If you go and read, the kind of book I always tell people to read, which is the Satyricon by Petronius, go read that book. It's really fun. But it's also written in like the around the age of Nero. So a lot of the jokes in there will feel really weird to you because, yeah, we don't live in the age of Nero anymore. Some of the jokes will feel incredibly modern. There's there's stuff that when the two main characters are gay, and then at some point they have like this really interesting polyamorous relationship with a woman, and everyone is doing all kinds of stuff on the side, and you're like, holy shit, why is this? How old is this? But you need to sort of know the context up to a point to be able to enjoy older books. And I think Matt's approach does not work, of not knowing anything beforehand, does not work for something like Titus Groan, and it doesn't work for something like Conan. I shudder to even think about what he would say if he would try to read The Worm of Roboros. I hope he hasn't, and I hope he never will, because I don't think it works for those kind of books. You need to have some context there. I am not hungover, Kale. I did not drink a single drop of alcohol yesterday, so I am not hungover. Yeah, I agree. It was very much 21st century and so forth, but I did appreciate someone just doing that, because I could have made the same review as a form of parody, but to actually have someone do that sort of like validates sort of like ideas that I have about like how some people on BookTube are reading in that regard. So there's that. Also, fuck, you made me mad, and now I've spent way more time talking than I planned to. Shall we maybe try to do another sprint for the next 45 minutes? So we'll be done by 25 past the hour, and then I can hit the gym and so forth. How does that sound? Also, Britton, I completely forgot to ask. I hope your dentist appointment went well today. So yeah, let's do the sprinting thing that I promised we would do like ages ago. And we are back, or I am at least. How's everyone doing? I did do some things. I did not actually continue writing on the fiction thing, which makes me feel bad, but what can you do? I did once again go over the sort of structure for that next part of the Mormonism video, so at least something happened there. And then I tried to do, to see if my updated screen reader does actually work with the YouTube functions that didn't work recently. So I played around with that, and yes, some of it does work now. I then forgot to click the wrong button, so everything I set up did fail, but now I know I can do it. So that's probably what I'll do once I'm back from the gym in a bit. So, slight success, I would call this. Yeah. I get that, Kale. I have yet to look at my bank account for this month, and I'm obviously worried about it. I'm always scared about looking at my bank account because being broke kind of sucks. But what can you do? So I probably should do that before the whole concert thing on Saturday, just to know what I'll be doing. But yeah, life's expensive these days, which is frustrating because it's often expensive in ways that don't necessarily need to be expensive, or in ways that you can less and less cover with like the kind of money you actually get paid for doing any kind of work. So, topic for a different day, I suspect, because I probably should slowly get going if I want to catch that bus. So I can go to the gym and hopefully record the next part of that fucking Mormonism video so I can finally get it out of the way and move on to the next part and the next part and the next part. I mean, chances of it being finished this week are probably already somewhat diminished by now, but if I manage to record like 1 or 2 parts today, that would be, a start at least. And then I could do some more tomorrow. And even if I'm not done by the end of the week, at least I'm somewhat closer. That sounds like a good idea, Apollo. So I wish you luck with the chilling and mostly the learning Kurdish. And yeah, I'll go to the gym and hurt myself in a productive way, I guess. So yeah, thanks everybody for hanging out. I'll see you all tomorrow for the last time this week, and have a great day, everybody.